afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending of where in the world you're located. It's really a pleasure this afternoon to welcome you from Europe, but we also know we've got people from different countries coming from all across South America, for instance, and a couple from Northern America. So welcome to everybody. Very happy today to have a new webinar on the topic of engagement for value. It's really a great pleasure for me today to be together with Aurélien, who's been offering to share his knowledge and perspective on the topic of engagement. Maybe Aurélien, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Hervé, for welcoming me. I'm a CEO of a company called Engagement and Performance. I used to be a CPO for quite many years. Lastly, CPO for Essilor Group. So I know procurement very well. I know EIPM very well as well, because I've been awarded in 2019, I think, for the Procurement Organization of the Year. So I'm very happy to be with you and to share what I know and what I do in terms of engagement.
Thanks a lot. I will just give a little bit of a background introduction. I think last year, about a year ago, we've been releasing our book on the fifth generation purchasing, when pace meet power, and we've really been emphasizing this importance of diversity in a team, but also acting as a group, as a network of individuals within a procurement organization. And in terms of how to bring a vision into reality, we've been insisting a lot. It's not just about having a few individuals who are working in their own lane in isolation from the rest of the procurement team, but really to have a sense of a community, a compelling vision that brings people together, role models of behaviors and value that are important all across the organization and even beyond its boundaries. It's also about mutual learning, coaching, peer feedback, but many opportunities for people to engage in sharing success, best practice, and report as well on, the outcomes of some innovative approach, experimentation they've been going on with. It is about people, but just not about training them on the foundations of procurement, but recruiting for diversity, making sure they're being continuously developed and also recognized for the great contribution they make to the organization. In terms of the impact of this, I think we've seen, as part of the EIPM Peter Krajic Award, some very big gap between the leading organization and the laggards, the other one, in terms of their performance in topics like recruitment, career development, succession management, community management, internal communication, and the development of expertise. So one of the biggest gaps you will find between the one that are ahead of the pack and the one that are in the back is really about this involvement in investment in people and bringing them to the forefront of this level of a vibrant community. So how do we create a vibrant community of buyers who are impacting on stakeholders and who are impacting on suppliers? I think this will be the questions for you to start with, Aurélien, today.
Thank you, Hervé, for this tricky question. Are you going to put my presentation, or should I?
Yeah, I'm working on
it. It's coming. Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
The floor is yours now.
Yes, thank you very much. All right. So, as I said at the beginning, and as Hervé emphasized in his introduction, we are going to talk about engagement. which is really something that companies and sourcing organizations are not used to talk about. So we'll talk about what it means. We'll talk about how to activate it, and most importantly, because I know you guys as procurement professionals, you love numbers. We'll talk about the business case as well. Just one word on my company, engagement and performance. After many years in large companies and in procurement in particular, I decided to focus on this topic and to create the only consultancy dedicated to this topic. So we work with companies to help them during their transformations, where you need a lot of energy from the teams, to remobilize the teams after specific events, especially like what we are living now in the post-crisis mode, where you need to remobilize the energies and remobilize the team around a common ambition. And also the skills, because it's engagement is also about the skills. It's also about understanding what drives engagement in a team. So we work with large and mid companies on all these topics, and you will understand in a few slides why I decided to stop working in large organization and to focus on this topic, because this is really a significant opportunity. So let's share with you the executive summary. This is the executive summary of 50 years of academic studies and experiences, which apparently didn't reach large organizations yet, because intuitively we know that people are not machines. We know it for ourselves. We know that some days we wake up with a good mood and we are extremely motivated and we can deliver like we have never done before, and some days it's the opposite, and we know it for ourselves. But unfortunately, when it comes to the organization and to management, we tend to manage people like machines, and we use words which are really machine oriented. We deliver on KPIs, we manage change and uncertainty, which are just by definition unmanageable. We put pressure to get the most out of our resources. So the word resource is not about people. So we tend to forget, and we've been taught to forget, that people are not machines. But actually, we also know that it's true, because when we put pressure, it doesn't mean that we get what we want. And when we want to control, we know that we are not able to control, because people are not machines. So that's a starting point. And when you understand that, then the question is, how it comes that we are not able to address this topic in a serious way in companies, and how it comes we are not able to build plans and build a vision around people. First of all, let's have a look at the definitions, because behind the words, it's very important to understand the meaning and the purpose of what we call engagement. So my definition of engagement, there are many, you can find many on the market, but my definition of engagement is for an individual, for a team, or for an organization, it's the 3S rule. It means, say, stay, and strive. Say is about what you are going to say to your friends and to your family about your team and your organization, and what you're going to say about it on the social networks as well, which are more and more important for the reputation of the organization. If you are naturally sharing good things about your organization, it's definitely a symptom of engagement. Stay is about how far do you see yourself in the future of the organization. Do you turn down external opportunities when they pop up? If you do it, automatically without even thinking about it, it's clearly a sign of engagement in your team and your organization. And strive is a bit more difficult to measure, but it's about going the extra mile, whatever it takes to make your organization succeed. It's about giving all your energy behind your projects and behind your objectives. So these three dimensions are really defining engagement. And engagement can also be defined by opposition to other words that you can see as well around this topic. The first one is engagement is not satisfaction or even less happiness. You can be happy in your life, you can be happy in your work without being engaged. And most of the well-being initiatives that you can see around, like free breakfast or table football or whatever Silicon Valley type of initiative you can imagine, it's been proven that these initiatives most often drive satisfaction. You're happy about having a table football in your office, but does it really drive engagement? Does it really drive long-term engagement in your company? Most often it's not the case. Engagement is not motivation. It has a link though, because motivation is usually the first step towards engagement, but it's not sustainable. You can be very motivated one day and not the day after. So motivation is a good sign of engagement, but you have to go further and make it sustainable. Employee experience is a word that is more and more used. It comes from the CRM world, where you have the customer experience. It's a tool. It's a tool to analyze all the interactions between an employee and its organization across its life cycle. It can be used to drive engagement action plan, but it's actually not engagement itself. Okay, so engagement is really a specific word that I like a lot, because it reflects not only the short-term motivation and energy, but it reflects something very sustainable, which is really good for the organization in the long run. So these definitions being clear, I'm moving to the business case. So I just put some numbers coming from two different studies, but you can find many of them, and they're all going in the same direction, even though the numbers might be different. The first message, and the one you can see on the left part, is wherever you go in the world, all the studies shows that a large part of active employees are actually disengaged. This example is for French people, which is actually one of the worst score in Europe and in the world. But you can find similar type of scores everywhere in the world. Actually, people working in large companies, large and medium companies, usually have a small part of their staff, of their headcount, which is really actively engaged. So going the extra mile, and seeing themselves in the organization in the long run, saying good things. And here you can see 1/3 of the French employees are actively disengaged, which means that you have 1/3 of the people who actually they are destroying value in the company. To make it simple, this is a significant problem, and this has been going on for years and years. And every year the stats are actually worse and worse. So how come we don't address it in a top priority way? The second message, which is the one on the right side, is that we know now for many years that engaged employees perform better. There are many studies about it. And intuitively, without doing any academic study, we know it for ourselves. we know that when we are in good mood and very motivated for some stupid reasons, we deliver much more. We are more productive. This study comes from the universities of Harvard and MIT, and their conclusion is that an engaged employee is on average 31% more productive than average people or employees. They are 2 times less sick, 6 times less absent, 9 times more loyal, and 55% more creative. So this is just one example of study, but all the studies which are around this topic are going in the same direction about 2-digit numbers. So this is, if you look at these 2 messages, this opens the way for a huge opportunity. Some institutes have even tried to put dollars in front of this opportunity, and here I put an example that have been calculated by one of them, which estimates it's about a loss of 17% of GDP, which is huge. And if I translate that into a procurement language, we are talking about 17% of savings. All right. So that's what we are talking about. In reality, it's a bit more complex and it's a bit less linear. And because I used to be a consultant for many years, and because I'm jealous of Peter Kraljic, who has his own metrics, I created my chart based on many data points that we have. And this chart shows basically how the population spreads across 2 axes. One is the y-axis is the contribution to overall company performance. So if you talk about procurement professionals, we are talking about savings, we're talking about working capital, we're talking about supplier innovation, whatever your KPIs are, but this is what we are talking about. And on the x-axis, here we measure the employee engagement, which is something that can easily be measured. There are many ways to do it. There are many tools on the market. It's something that many companies do already. What you can see is that there are basically three segments in companies. People who are actively disengaged, who are toxic for the company because they are actually destroying value. And the more you wait, the more they destroy, because the trend when you are in this segment is not to improve. The trend is that you end up exiting the company, or you end up in a burnout situation, this type of thing. So it's a different world. It needs very specific action plans, and this is not where my company is acting. On the yellow side, in the middle, you have what we call the passive involvement, which means that people are doing their job, they contribute to the company, but they don't go the extra mile. They just do their job, and they are not trying to do anything more than that. Usually, it's a big part of the people who are in the middle of this chart. And on the right side is people who are actively engaged and who are actually extremely creative, who are able to innovate, who are able to change the game, who are able to bring new products, bring new projects. So this is where you create a lot of value, and this is where it's actually exponential. And the more people are engaged, the more they create value. So that's a very positive trend. So the name of the game here is not to engage everybody. The name of the game is to make sure you engage the people in the yellow side, and that you make them move from yellow to green. And when you do that, depending on the people and depending on where you are, you can have different type of return. But some of the examples I have in mind show a return on investment of 12, at least 10, which means that in 1 month, you have the payback from your investment, whatever it is. So that's an incredible return on investment. I doubt you have this return on investment in many projects in companies. And when you look at, the money companies invest in IT systems for the long term, I know it's a trend, but how comes we are not able to invest more in people, because the return on investment can be significant as well? Okay, I'm not saying we shouldn't invest in digital, but sometimes the trend make us invest in things where there is actually no return. So that's just to keep that in mind. I think that's an important point. There is a lot of money at stake. Now, why companies are not able to translate that into results, because it's an area which is quite recent, and most companies have not invested yet in this topic. But I can tell you that this is coming, and the COVID situation has accelerated the need for this. So as sourcing and procurement professionals, you can definitely be proactive and bring this topic to HR and have a discussion with them about how needed it is to start addressing this topic in a professional way. In companies there are so many levels, like industrial levels, like recruitment plan, like there is a plan for everything. There are KPIs for everything. How comes we are not able to put a KPI on people engagement? How comes we are not able to put plans in place to improve people engagement? Very often it is measured, but the action plan is extremely weak. So that's the opportunity, and that's the name of the game. Moving to the next point, here, especially for you guys, procurement professional, it's extremely important to understand that engagement is contagious. It's a culture, like Hervé said. So it's not only about engaging your teams and making sure that they're extremely motivated so that they are productive. That's one point, but that's only one area. The key to understand is that when they are engaged, first of all, they are in good health. So they are, in mental and physical health, but also they are able to bring a lot to the organization. The organization is more productive, of course, but also more stable because there is less turnover. For example, I was discussing with the retailer last week. By putting in place an engagement plan, they have been able to reduce turnover by 15 points in their stores, which is significant. So it's a huge amount of savings in terms of training, recruitment, and so on. Plus, they are able to improve the loyalty of their customers by having, very stable staff in place. High-performing organization also in terms of reputation, because when you have the employer branding at stake, when you have your CSR brand at stake, then you can really understand the value of engagement. And last but not least, business partners. Business partners, so for you guys, we are talking about your suppliers and your stakeholders, your internal stakeholders. Now that I'm not in procurement anymore, I can tell you that some of my internal stakeholders share with me, what they really think about procurement. And they tell me, when we see a procurement professional who is actually very engaged, who is smiling, who is very curious about what I'm doing, truly, engaged in my projects, I'm opening up very easily, and I'm bringing this person to the decision table, and I'm sharing information. When I see someone who is, not engaged, only transactional, trying to do his job and his RFQ and so on, not even smiling, not even looking at me, not even interested in what I'm saying, why should I work with this person? In this case, I would close everything, So there is a theory behind that, which is called the symmetry of attention. Is when you have when you take care about your employees, then all the customers of this employee are getting engaged as well. And this is true for sales, for the sales force, but it's also true for procurement. So think about what you do to engage your internal stakeholders and your suppliers, because behind these names there are people and they have their own motivation. They have their sometimes very personal motivations, like going on vacation or getting promoted or working on something that is of interest to them. Sometimes it goes way beyond the business. So by taking that into account, you will make the difference. Okay, so that's really something that is key when you talk about engagement. Is that there are there is a lot of contagion in the organization. I've been in procurement for many years, and for many years I've heard a lot about improving the soft skills of buyers or sourcing professionals. But soft skills are good, of course, and you have to improve your communication skills, interpersonal skills, and so on. But if you're not engaged, it's useless. So you can be very good at communication, but if we don't feel that you have energy, it doesn't help. So this is why engagement is a little bit different than soft skills, and sometimes much easier to drive. So now let's move to something more concrete, and let's see some solutions and how you can drive engagement with your team, with your stakeholders, with your suppliers. First of all, you have to understand that engagement is not only about one type of action. Okay, the problem in many companies is that there is an investment only in one side. For example, we decide that we have to improve management style, so we train managers and we only focus on that. But the problem is that you may have a very good manager, but if you are not happy about your working conditions, if you are not happy about the relationship with your colleagues, you're not going to get engaged. So it's very important to have a comprehensive view of engagement and to address all the dimensions of engagement. Most of the disengagement in companies, especially for new generations, comes from the fact that there is no consistency. So when you are in the recruitment process, you've been told something about the culture of the organization, and 1 week after, when you join the company, you see something completely different. So the comprehensiveness, but also the consistency of what is done in engagement is absolutely key. The second thing is that engagement is specific to each team. Okay, being a CEO or being a manager or being a director, you can decide what you think can engage your employees, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work because this is not something that you can decide. This being said, you can work with your team to better understand what their daily job looks like in the details, from their home to the transport to the office to their interactions and so on, and develop the solutions with them, because they know what they need. You don't know what they need. So that's really a key aspect of engagement. It depends on the culture, it depends on the team, it depends on the context as well. If you're in the middle of a big merger, it's not the same as if you are in a steady business situation. So you have to adapt, and every year I really encourage you to define a specific engagement plan for your specific team that address all these 5 areas. let's talk about a little bit very quickly about these 5 areas, which do not cover the salary aspects. Okay, it's a big debate, but there are many studies which show that actually salary increase drives satisfaction, short-term satisfaction, but doesn't drive engagement. You can be extremely happy to feel recognized with a salary increase, but maybe 1 month later you're going to want the next increase. So it's just a rat race, and it doesn't really have a strong impact on your engagement in the long term. There are many actions which are very often very tactical and very cheap actions, which have a much higher impact on your team engagement. If we look at purpose and recognition, I really encourage you to look at what is the purpose of your team and the individuals in your team. You can talk about the company mission or this type of very high-level statements which people don't believe anymore. Okay, but what is your team purpose? What does your team want to learn, for instance? What are the projects they want to really focus on? What are the type of relationships you want to have in the team? These are just ideas, but having the discussion in your team of what your purpose is, and sometimes this purpose can have nothing to do with your KPIs or with the company strategy. But if you define it, then you are able to drive engagement in your team because you have something that speaks to each member of the team. Just to give you an example, I was in the middle of a big merger with my management team, and we had the discussion. Okay, we are afraid of what's going to happen in the team. We don't know how it's going to look like. We don't know if the organization is going to change, and so on. So there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of uncertainty. As a team, you can decide to stick to this uncertainty or to define something else. And we decided to focus on our own development and our own learning and say, okay, merger, maybe you don't live that every day in your career. Why don't we learn about it? And maybe even if we leave the company, it's going to be a line in our resume. So when you change the focus and try to define a purpose that speaks to the team, then you really have a different engagement driver. Recognition is also important. What you can see here on the wall is a picture wall where you have all the pictures of the employees. This has been done in an hospital. So they hired a photographer, so not so costly, and they put a very beautiful picture of each employee on the wall. Just by doing that, and just by seeing that they are on the wall, that they have been beautified, employees, they feel part of the organization and they feel that they are being recognized on top of all the other recognition aspects. These type of things is not expensive, and I can tell you it had a tremendous impact on the engagement of the team. Leadership and management. I'm not going to go into the details. You can do thousands of trainings on management, but at the end of the day, what makes the difference in the team is the way you animate the team. So one idea, for instance, I'm sharing with you is, why don't you reinvent your staff meetings? Instead of doing very formally around a table or around a video conference, why don't you completely reinvent it and do it with your team? Make it a game. Why don't you why don't you do it standing? Why don't you do it with some fun rituals in there? Why don't you spend some time to talk not only about the project, the KPIs, and so on, but why don't you talk about the team life and how you're going to reinforce the cohesion in the team. So these are just ideas, and you can be extremely creative. But if you develop your own staff meeting style, it's going to be a very funny exercise for everybody, and you're going to end up reinforcing the cohesion in your team. Team relationships. Here, there are words that you don't often use in companies, which are, mutual assistance and solidarity. We can talk about collaboration, but collaboration is very formal. How do you drive such a culture so that when people need help, they ask for help? It sounds obvious, but we don't do that. We don't do that because there is job descriptions, because we have our own pride. We don't want to appear as weak. But what makes you go to your colleague and say, I see that you have this skill. I need your help. So in order to foster that, you can put in place some very simple things like mentoring or reverse mentoring. So here on the picture, you see that a young digital native person is helping a senior executive understand everything about digital, and it goes the opposite way as well. This type of thing doesn't cost anything. It's a very simple idea, but by putting in place this type of connections in the team, which are completely not non-obvious connections, you foster the culture of mutual assistance, and you reinforce the links between the people. So another idea, health and well-being. There are many things to say about it, but we are all overwhelmed with video conference. So we spend our time in video conference. I could have done this webinar, sitting and behind my computer. But the fact that I'm standing, first of all, you feel much more energy when you look at me, but also I'm in better health because I'm actually moving. I feel much more self-confident about me. So there are some things that you can do in your work and in the way you organize your work that really drives your energy up or drive your energy down. So it's extremely important that you identify those moments and be creative about it. So the piece of furniture that you see on the picture is actually something I built myself. And this can be a team building exercise. You build your own remote work furniture. Why not? So that's another example. And work environment, just to close the loop. One of my clients, which is a big company in France, asked me to reinvent their canteen. So this might sound completely crazy and not so interesting, but it's actually extremely strategic, because the canteen is actually the only place and the only location in the office where everybody and all the departments see each other. So it's a location where you can drive cross-functional work, cross-functional communication, where you can reinforce the links between departments and between people in an informal way, which is very often the best way to make it work. And just by looking at these common spaces that you have in your office, especially now in the time of remote working, you will go less to the office. So when you go there, you have to make it extremely efficient, extremely collective, and it has to bring something to you which is very different from what you can have at home. If it's just to sit behind a desk, then why should you go to the office? So by reinventing these common spaces and this common workspace, you can really drive engagement. And that's actually something you can do with your teams. You have some space, how do we reinvent it? How do we create some fun rituals? How do we use the wall to communicate between us? There are many things to do. And very often it is sub-optimized. very often the places like canteen or coffee rooms and so on are only used a few hours a day. So you can, this is an area where there are so many things to do and where you can invent a lot of things to create and drive engagement. So be creative about that. There are many things to do. I'm gonna conclude just to leave time for questions and answers. So I will skip this one. So in a nutshell, you understand that engagement is a highly profitable lever, which is still untapped as I see it. It has been accelerated by COVID, so don't miss the train. Take the train and make sure you look at it, because your teams are expecting that. And maybe that's also something you can bring to HR so that they work on it. But it's also a tool for you to engage your business partners, whether it is your suppliers or your internal stakeholders. Okay. Look at this theory of symmetry of attention, because this is really something that will make the difference between sourcing professionals who do their job in a very transactional way, or people who actually put energy, engagement, and the secret sauce that make things happen. And last but not least, and this is really for me the key message that I want you to take away, is engagement solutions are multiple. They are not expensive. Most of them are really extremely cheap or don't cost anything, and the return on investment is almost immediate. But please remember, it's a bottom-up topic. If you don't pay attention to what your teams live in their daily job, you're gonna miss the target. So that's it in a nutshell. I think we have time for questions and answers, or at least questions. I will see if I can bring answers, but the floor is yours.
Well, maybe I can start, and we'll see if this, brings some questions from the audience afterward. One of the when I saw your chart moving from the toxic to the creative side, is this what would you say? I mean, some people might be very much at ease in staying more or less in the middle. I've sometimes had in my team people have been calling the good citizens. You can rely on them, very robust job. But maybe trying to move them too much versus the creative engagement will actually kind of disengage them in some ways. I don't know if you see my point. Pushing too much sometimes is not the point. It's just leveraging the skills of everyone. So, I mean, is this something what you see as the moves across? And do everyone need to move to level 10 or?
Well, it's like any maturity matrix. You cannot have everybody on the green side. Otherwise, you will have to resegment the green side and then start again. So, no, of course, you will not be able to reach everybody. But I think when you do it bottom up and when you pay attention and try to find solutions which are local and that works locally, you are able to address basically all type of needs and all types of people. And sometimes there are very small things that create the move, and sometimes these are very personal, and we can see it right now in the post when people are starting to go back to the office. The number one reason why people want to go back to the office is to see their colleagues, is not to work on their projects or improve their KPIs. They want to see their colleagues, sometimes people might not be the most engaged people on the planet, but if you are able to find a project or a purpose that speaks to them, then you are able to improve that engagement.
Do you think any KPI can create engagement?
I think, well, I'm not sure. I think some people are more sensitive and are more result oriented than others, for sure. My experience is that it has less impact on engagement than other more human solutions.
Interesting.
And I think some companies have put in place a very high variable pay for sourcing professionals, and I know some of them, and they actually went back. They went back because this drove some bad behaviors in the team with the stakeholders, and actually didn't drive engagement at all. It drove competition. It drives cost cutting. So depending on what you have to do, you can play with these tools, of course, and these are management tools, but I'm not sure this drives engagement.
Okay, I think we've got questions coming into the so, but I'll need your help, Aurélien, to read them because my glasses don't allow me. I think get the engagement in is not so difficult.
Yeah. Get the engagement
The
is not
point
so difficult.
is to keep this alive. What to do? So how
It
to
is
keep
how
it
to
alive?
Yes. Yeah, it's true, and you see many companies who launch engagement survey when there are a lot of burnout in the company, or when there is a layoff plan, or this type of very negative events. I think engagement surveys, the objective of engagement surveys should be to increase engagement, not something else, not to do communication or not to fix a big issue. It's really to improve engagement. So having this regular routine to measure engagement every year, I think, and the year I think is a good time horizon. And every year, not only measuring, but also translating that into action and action plan. You have recruitment plans, you have industrial plans, you have everything, but why don't we have an engagement plan? So every year, I believe a team should define its own engagement plan, covering all the 5 aspects I shared, with solutions they've found themselves or with companies like mine. But this is a very simple way to do it. It's not difficult. The point is to do it and to take ownership of it. So that would be my answer. I take the next question.
Yes, please.
Eric, who is a former colleague of mine, to be very transparent. Hello, Aurélien. Congratulations on this venture. Very good presentation. My question is in the remote working environment. Our company is already before COVID working in the method. Have you seen more companies challenged with engagement, especially with regards to stakeholders? And can you share an example on how to tackle this challenge? So, yeah, I mean, remote working is a key challenge for everybody. There are many ways to answer, but let me give you maybe a few very concrete solutions that I believe can address that. First of all, video conference is the new email. We get overwhelmed by video conference. Apparently, I've seen several studies, but I think remote working does improve productivity by 15 to 20%, depending on the job you're doing. If we reinvest this 15-20% of productivity into more video conference, we are dead. So I think training ourselves, because this is quite a recent tool, but training ourselves to do less video conference or to do it for very specific purpose. That's one. And to do it better by maybe working on the informal side of it, not being so transactional, because we see ourselves. So this is a very interesting dimension that we sub-use, I believe. How do we improve our non-verbal behavior and language? How do we how are we able to convey some emotions through visual conference? How do we use our background to maybe convey something about our mood, about who we are? I think that you can be very creative about it, but the home office is now part of the extended office. So it has to be thought through exactly like offices are. So that's something I would really, I think there is a huge room for improvement in that field. So that's really something. The second thing is about remote versus presence. I think we are going to go less to the office, much less. So we have to, and I think HR has to way better organize these moments. It has to be efficient, it has to be collective, and it has to bring something completely different from what you experience at home. And there is a room for a lot of creativity there. You can imagine experiences that you have never had before in an office, and some companies are actually starting to innovate in that field. Otherwise, each employee is gonna arbitrate. Should I stay at home where I have a lot of flexibility, I can do manage kids, I can do cooking, I can do sport. Why should I go to the office? There is no point. So that's something else that we have to consider. Then, last but not least, I think a lot of people are extremely impatient to go back and meet their colleagues. Some have fear as well, but all that means a lot of energy. What do we do as managers with all this energy? It's time to launch new topics. It's time to launch new initiatives, new projects, and use this energy in a very positive way. So I really encourage all the managers not to be in a waiting mode and saying, okay, now it's post-COVID and we're going to see what's happening and so on. No, take the opportunity to launch some new things, new programs and so on. So these are a few answers. I think we don't have time to go more in details, but just to give you a few hints. Aurélien, thank you for the response. Okay, I worked in a company in the 50s that was very concerned with the topic, and I'm absolutely sure it works. Thank you very much, Antonio.
Well, thanks a lot. I think we're, reaching the end of the session. We'll see if there's an ultimate question popping up as part of the in the last point. But I think indeed this is really something that's really time. We've seen new ways of working. We've seen people being much more dynamic in their ways of approaching a different time horizon in their work, for instance. And there's certainly something to leverage out of all of these development we've seen over the past 18 months. And I love, engagement can come out from, keeping the good out of the challenging time we've been going through.
And I think procurement can be exemplary on this topic, because engagement doesn't produce anything. It's only about people. And it's only about connecting people, connecting suppliers with stakeholders and so on. So I think, this is a great area of experiment for this type of approach. And I think procurement managers and directors should really take this topic as a very serious topic. I know procurement love to have numbers, tools, and processes, but it's maybe time to look at something else.
I think what was one thing that was interesting actually as part of the Peter Krajic Award of this year is we've seen some of the companies that have been doing really well throughout this challenging time have been companies who really focused on communicating still on long-term aspects, communicating about the forthcoming investment. So instead of focusing on the here and now and the current challenge, it was really interesting to see how much the constancy of purpose was very much part of their communication, and that really makes a difference in terms of how people embrace all the unknown that were coming their way.
Yeah, fully agree.
Fantastic. It's been really a pleasure, to spend the hour with you, Aurélien. And I wish you all the best and looking forward to meet you very soon, maybe face to face one of these days in Paris or somewhere else.
All right.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye bye, everyone. Thank you.